So let me start with limiting foreign steel imports to ensure that our steel producers have a bigger share of our market. Doing so will unlock hundreds of millions of dollars in domestic demand for those producers. We will reduce tariff-free steel imports from non-free trade area partners from 50% of 2024 levels, as it is today, to 20% of those levels. This will open up more than $850 million in new domestic demand for Canadian steel. Second, we will reduce tariff-free steel imports from non-CUSMA free trade area partners from 100% of 2024 levels to 75% of those levels, unlocking more than $540 million in additional market access for our producers. We'll impose a global 25% tariff on targeted imported steel derivative products, such as wind towers, prefabricated buildings, fasteners and wires, to grow demand for Canadian-made steel. Those products as a whole represent about a $10 billion market. And we will toughen our broader compliance measures to prevent foreign steel dumping. To do so, the Canadian Border Service Agency will be equipped with a dedicated steel compliance team, enhanced detection of false declarations, and expanded online reporting tools. Our temporary horizontal remission of Canadian tariffs on imports has helped Canadian businesses deal with the early impacts of those tariffs. However, over the longer term, such broad remissions would only hurt Canada's steel sector. So to move away from relying on imported steel and to give Canadian companies time to adjust their supply chains to use Canadian steel, those temporary remission measures will end on January 31st, 2026, for steel used in Canada for manufacturing, food and beverage packaging, and agricultural production. Now, the second broad way to drive transformation of our strategic industries is by becoming our own best customer. So we'll build big with Canadian suppliers, investing in roads, bridges, homes, and community centers. A bit later this year, we'll implement that Buy Canadian policy, which will ensure that Canadian materials, including steel and lumber, are prioritized in all contracts over $25 million, and that this applies across federal grants and contribution programs, especially those in infrastructure. To maximize the use of Canadian softwood lumber in housing and infrastructure, we will prioritize shovel-ready multi-year projects that can begin in the next 12 months using, of course, Canadian wood. With a funding allocation of roughly $700 million next year, Build Canada Homes, our new federal home building agency, this alone will create $70 to $140 million of new demand for Canadian wood products and attract private and provincial capital to multiply that impact. In order to build on that, I'm announcing today that we will make it more affordable to transport Canadian steel and lumber across this country by cutting freight rates for transporting steel and lumber interprovincially by 50%. We'll do that through funding directly Canadian National and Canadian Pacific Kansas City Railways. And finally, we will increase protections for Canadian steel and lumber workers and those businesses so they can adapt and seize new opportunities. We'll help employers retain workers by expanding our earlier supports and enhancing our work-sharing programs, increasing income replacement ratios, income replacement benefits from 55% to 70%. We will also provide an additional $500 million to the Business Development Bank of Canada's Softwood Lumber Guarantee Program to ensure that companies have the financing and the credit support that they need to maintain and restructure their operations during this period of transformation. And similarly, we will deploy $500 million in funding under the Large Enterprise Tariff Loan Facility, specifically for softwood lumber firms, the larger ones facing liquidity pressures. We'll make it easier for the forestry sector to access federal support by establishing a single window for applications, a one-stop shop to help companies navigate our broad suite of support programs. And lastly, we will launch a Canadian Forest Sector Transformation Task Force that seeks input and recommendations from provinces, territories, and industry on how to seize new opportunities in softwood lumber and create new growth in the sector.